for all of those of you who are participating. It's good to see some of our good friends. This press conference is about H.R. 40. It's a bill that the Congresswoman was honored to take up from the Honorable John Conyers, who had been introducing this bill since 1989. She has taken it on as a lifelong task of seeing African Americans get some sort of reparations moving forward from where we are now, given all of the things that are going on in the country. The Congresswoman has attained over 150 co-sponsors for this bill, and we are excited about what is taking place today. And I will turn over to Congresswoman to introduce our participants.
Thank you so very much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone if you are on the East Coast. Thank you for your patience. Chairman Cohen, I had just come off the Helsinki Commission joint meeting on racial equity with the European Union. I want those who are on to recognize that your power, your voice is being heard around the world. I encourage you to engage the soccer community that is so broadly international and others, because we are recognizing that this is an international crisis, and it is. It has come to a moment in time that we cannot wait. That is our theme. We cannot wait. Dr. Martin Luther King said this more than 40 years ago, I might add, before any of us were born. But we have taken up that cause to say why we can't wait. To the media that has joined us, your voice is going to be extremely important, listening to these voices of power, to know that as I see our athletes who are athletic leaders kneel, stand, link arms, my heart stands and sits and kneels with them. We are grateful for that leadership. Do not stop. We are on the move. The nation, for it to be its best angels, its mountaintop status, for the world to see us, we have got to cure the ills and the cancer of racism, systemic racism, institutional racism. Let me just quickly say, I am privileged to be able to carry H.R. 40 for a community that was in bondage for more than 200 years, a community that experienced 4,000 lynchings, a community that through the 20th century was in the arms of Jim Crow, starting with the hanging fruit in the early 1900s. But yet, we served in every war in this nation since the Revolutionary War. We shed our blood. My dear colleague from Tennessee and Memphis, I'll just tell this story. We fought in the Civil War. When we intended to surrender to soldiers in Tennessee because we had lost a particular battle, meaning Black soldiers, the descendants of ex-slaves, the descendants of slaves, we knew the war protocol. We had lost that battle. We were to surrender and be held as prisoners of war until the war was over. But we did not get that courtesy. We were murdered. 255 Black soldiers were murdered by the Confederate Army. That is what has been our destiny. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, all of our property was burned, and 300 of us were killed and buried in a mass grave. I don't say this in anger. I say this with gratitude to my colleague who's on the line, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Constitution. He understood this, and together we have pushed this legislation, and we will continue to push it. But your voice is mighty, because this commission, we can do no less. A commission that is appointed, it's a governmental commission, appointed by the majority leader, the minority leader, the speaker, the minority leader in the House and Senate. And it is then appointed with members from the President of the United States, of scholars, who will discern how we deal with this monetarily, how we deal with it in terms of structure. And I believe, as the U.S. Conference of Mayors, that's a powerful endorsement we received. It's not Black mayors, it's mayors across America have indicated that they support not a concept, they support H.R. 40. And they even put a number on it. And there are others with numbers. My task is to get this legislation passed. And so to you who have come here, I'm so grateful for you to push, push, push. Everywhere you go, every city you go, something should come out on that basis. let me now, and I thank you for listening to my passion, but the concept is government sanctioned slavery, then we need government sanctioned relief. And we're not asking your neighbor for a check. United States government must do its job. I'm delighted now to yield to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee's Committee on the Constitution, my good friend and strong ally for civil rights and civil liberties and what is fair, a fourth generation Memphian from Tennessee, but he has had a life of public service and he has maintained a deep abiding commitment for the African American community and others, and he is a constitutionalist, and I'm grateful to be at his side. Chairman Cohen, for a moment in this press conference. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate my colleague, Sheila Jackson-Lee, for her comments, for her leadership on this issue, and she's taken John Conyers' mission and moved it ahead, which needed to happen. John Conyers was one of my mentors in Congress. I came to the Congress in 2007, and John Conyers immediately was my spiritual leader. He sponsored H.R. 40 since 1989, and he chose the number 40 for 40 acres and a mule, which the freed slaves were more or less promised after the war. And land, I guess the land was in South Carolina, and that didn't happen. So Mr. Conyers had hearings, and I participated in them on this bill, but never congressional hearings. They were briefings at the Congressional Black Caucus. And at one of them, Charles Ogletree, one of the most distinguished attorneys in our history and a leader of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, spoke. And Mr. Ogletree, who was still with us, but I don't think active any longer, said that we're not talking about 40 acres and a mule. We're not even talking about the 21st century corollary to that, a condo and an SUV. We're talking about a study of reparations, a study that could be massive amounts of money to people who are African American, who were slaves, and to people who possibly have been left behind in other areas, with education, with healthcare, with job training. Whatever it is, it'll be a study, and we should have that study. And I appreciate Ms. Jackson-Lee's work in keeping this going. We've got the first congressional hearing, which was in our subcommittee, and now it's really the next step is up to Chairman Nadler, and Chairman Nadler has to work in coordination with Speaker Pelosi as far as having a markup on the bill and moving it along. I know that Ms. Lee Jackson-Lee has tried to talk to Mr. Nadler and others, and has been leading this effort. So I thank her for leading the effort. I'm honored to be a part of it. I appreciate all the athletes who are joining us today. The athletes made a tremendous impact on Black Lives Matter and the protests that's been going on in this country with their giving up 2 games during the NBA bubble series. It might have been the playoffs, but at least it was in the bubble. And then baseball joined and other sports joined. And it was a great show. And I think athletes have got the respect of the American public, and they can be and are leaders. So thank you for joining us. And let's just move on and get H.R. 40 to the floor. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that is what we're going to do. H.R. 40, the Commission to study and develop proposals for reparations, and so we have moved it to an action place, and that will occur. We're delighted now to have the privilege of introducing Benjamin Watson, former NFL tight end, Super Bowl champion, and Players Coalition Task Force, played college football, the University of Georgia, went on to play 15 years professionally for the New England Patriots, Philadelphia Eagles, Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens, and the New Orleans Saints. As I indicated, you are leaders. And in 2015, Watson released Under Our Skin, Getting Real About Race. His knowledge about this issue is wide-reaching and stupendous. We're delighted. Mr. Watson, I am now calling upon you, not only in this press conference to indicate why we can't wait, but for us to travel around the nation so that we can say to America, stand in our shoes, and we will pass H.R. 40 immediately. Mr. Watson, I yield to you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jackson-Lee, and thank you to all those who are watching, who are supporting H.R. 40. This is a very, very critical moment, not just for African Americans, but for our country in general. Congresswoman Lee, we applaud your efforts. I sit here actually on behalf of the Players Coalition, serving on the task force. Thank you for involving us and bringing us into this press conference for this most important event and for this most important cause. We applaud your efforts. We share your conviction, and we believe that reparations strike at the heart of the structural racism that is evident in our society. The Players Coalition, for those that don't know, exists to end social injustices and racial inequality so that future generations have the opportunity to thrive without barriers. We believe that HR 40 will help us do just that. Right now, today, Blacks are nearly 6 times more likely than whites to be incarcerated for drug-related offenses, despite abusing drugs no more than their white counterparts. $23 billion more are spent annually on predominantly white K-12 school districts, as opposed to school districts of color. We must address individuals as well as institutions when it comes to inequity. We have too often been quick to do the former and tardy or unwilling to do the latter. Fellowship and cross-cultural relationships are important, but it does not address the historical doubled unemployment rate or the 10-to-1 wealth gap that we experience today in this country. Through legislation such as the Homestead Act of 1862, the Social Security Act, the Wagner Act, the GI Bill, Federal Housing Administration loans, affirmative action programs started in the 1960s, white Americans have consistently been given land and benefits to secure their procurement of the American dream, while their Black counterparts had to sit or stand or march and wait. It's also important for Americans to realize that there's a national and global precedent for such action. Germany made payments of $80 billion to Jews and to the rebuilding of the Israeli state in relation to the Holocaust. The US government, in fact, made payments to Japanese due to internment camps and to indigenous peoples due to treaty violations and maltreatment. Today, though, there is growing support for restitution. But that's not why HR 40 is important to you or to us. This piece of legislation is of utmost importance because it will serve as a bridge across a divide that has haunted our nation for far too many generations. In the interest of a more perfect union, in the interest of complete healing, we cannot continue to ignore such egregious debt that continues to inhibit and harm too many of our citizens and our communities. We owe it to ourselves to at least agree to study, just study the necessity and possible implementation of this action. Our goal as players, I believe your goal as legislators, the goal of the media and those who are sympathetic and understand is to propose economic strategies and processes to address the concerns of the 40 million living descendants of American slavery. This is not about victimhood. This is about celebrating our victories as individuals and as a nation. This is about conciliation and correction and the ensuing policy. I believe, that it's time to pass HR 40, and we will continue to press forward until it's done. I'd like to introduce next my friend and colleague, NFLPA Executive Committee member, safety for the Houston Texans, Michael Thomas, for his remarks. Thank you, Congresswoman. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ben.
you so very much. Michael, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. I mean, you spoke, truly from the heart and, elaborated on everything that, myself as a player, current player in this NFL feels, everything I would say. I will add on to that and just say thank you to everyone else, all our congressmen and women who are on this call today, fighting for legislation and try to create real change in this country. Thank y'all for having us, giving us this platform to speak and try to fight for real change in this country for our people and our communities. There's a time, or we're in a time right now where we can constantly keep trying to ask for, what's next? What can we do? We protesting. We see a lot of people, protesting in the streets. We see a lot of people, creating different hashtags, creating different movements like, look, Black Lives Matter. Say her name, say their names. But at the end of the day, what are we doing that's going to create real change, real actionable change that will change the landscape of what's going on in our country today? Can it be legislation? Is it ending qualified immunity? Is it changing or voting to pass the George Floyd bill, the ACT bill that Congresswoman Jackson Lee and many other legislators have passed in Congress and are trying to ask the Senate to bring it to the floor for a vote? Will that change everything that would, create the change that we're asking for? I say that's part of it, but another part of it is trying to say 400 years ago, there were atrocities, there were things done in this country to a group of people who did not deserve it. And now 400 years later, there has still never been anything done to right those wrongs. And HR 40, just like Benjamin said, the study of reparations, that's a step in the right direction. And being able to have African Americans do for themselves, not ask for handouts, not asking for stimulus checks, one-time payment, just to go back into our back into our economy, that doesn't get it done. We need something that's going to be sustainable. We need something that's going to be, you can accrue wealth over time. That's businesses, that's land. And again, the study of reparations, that's what HR 40 does. So it has to go hand in hand. You can't just try to change laws. You can't just try to change legislation and say, hey, qualified immunity, we're gonna strengthen those laws to try to change that. You can't just say, hey, we're gonna say these practices by law officers, the chokeholds, the racial profiling, we'll stop that and maybe that'll change. Because time and time again, you see, even when those laws change, they just find other loopholes and ways around it. So does that really help the people, the African-American community, the people that are Black and brown in this country? Does it really help create the real change we want to see? It has to go hand in hand with the study of reparations, which is HR 40. That will allow for true healing in this country. For us to finally say, hey, what was done over 400 years ago was wrong. We have left you behind when it comes to accruing wealth in this country. And here's a way for us to finally right those wrongs. So myself, as a current player in the NFL, who was passionate about it, as 4 years ago, chose to take a knee with Colin, Eric, Kenny, and joined in the protest with so many other athletes. 4 years ago, the conversation wasn't even there. It was like, oh, what are y'all talking about? There's no such thing as systemic oppression. There's no such thing as police brutality. We just need to talk more and understand more. Well, 4 years later, now I think we're finally at a point where people are saying, oh, okay, no, we see what you're saying. There's something going on. There is systemic oppression. There is racism, and it needs to stop. But what's next? What's the next steps? Let it not be another 4 years. Let it not be another 400 years before we finally do something that's going to create real actionable change. Let's take that step and let's pass HR 40 now. That way we won't have to wait all those years for real change. And sorry for rambling a little bit. I get passionate sometimes and my thoughts go all over the place, but as a current player, that's my passion. Just try to use my voice and platform to try to create real change and spread this message. So I'll yield, and I'll introduce another current athlete. He's a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's very thoughtful, and every time he gets a chance to speak about social justice, every time he gets to speak on anything, the baseball community loves him. Obviously everybody in the African American community love him and support him. So Chris Archer, I yield the floor to you, my man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Benjamin. You guys are what I'm aspiring to be. I'm aspiring to have the same voice as you guys. I'm on my way up, and I'm thankful for everybody that's on this call, especially Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She's so passionate and spearheading this. HR 40 is simply a first and reasonable step towards reconciliation. It is a commitment to truth-telling, studying, and coming up with ideas to treat the disease rather than a commitment to the treatment itself. The bill has been introduced for 30 years, yet for 30 years it has languished. If the protests have demonstrated anything, it is that immediate action can no longer wait. HR 40 cannot wait. When COVID-19 is decimating Black Americans at more than twice the rate of their counterparts across all age groups and areas of the country. HR 40 cannot wait when the gap between Black and white wealth is as large as it was in 1968. HR 40 cannot wait when school districts that have higher populations of Black and brown students receive $23 billion less in funding compared to mostly white school districts. It is time to pass HR 40. And that's what I had written down. But I think I want to just reiterate what Michael and Benjamin have said and Congresswoman have said. We're just asking for a study. We're not asking for anything in particular right now, but let's look into this. It's clear that something needs to be done. Other countries have done it. We've done it to help support other people in other countries. It's time for America to look itself in the mirror and do what's right for the Black community. With that being said, I'd now like to pass it back to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and thank you again for being on this call. And Congresswoman Jackson Lee, thank you so much for what you're doing to continue this. It's been a long time coming.
We will link arms together. I am so grateful to all of you, starting with, of course, Benjamin Watson for the in-depth knowledge that he has given and his own digging into this issue in terms of his book. Michael Thomas, who many of you might know was an intern in my office, so my door is open. We're in COVID-19, but we'll start that again. And Chris Archer, in your landscape, your arena of baseball, your leadership in a completely different sport with so many different players and teams, educating them would be educating America. And I can't thank you all enough for understanding that the commission to study and develop proposals, you know what it means? It is the umbrella. If it was ahead of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Civil Rights Act, we might be much further than we are because we would have attacked systemic racism and institutional racism. So I call it the umbrella of all civil rights legislation that we'll be developing proposals. So I'm grateful for your presence here today and for the media understanding. It's my pleasure to introduce a video message now from one of our esteemed players from the Portland Timbers and the Players Coalition, and that is Jeremy Ebobisi. We'll have a video from him now confirming his support for this historic and important legislation.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeremy Ebobisi and I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, where I currently reside and play for Portland Timbers of Major League Soccer. I'm humbled and honored to be joining you to talk about H.R. 40, the Commission to Study Reparations for African Americans. Something that I believe is long overdue and frankly is urgent and needed. I come to you with a backdrop of Ruby Bridges in my background and her journey to integrating schools, the perilous journey, I must say. And each time I think about this canvas, I'm reminded of how far we've come, but frankly, how far we still have to go in order to truly live up to the promise of an equitable society. Our inability to confront our history, some of the parts that this country is most ashamed of, has been the biggest barrier to racial reconciliation. Too many American citizens are still unaware of the systematic exclusion of African Americans from unions, from government jobs and programs, from the consistent redlining. And all of this manifests itself today with the wealth and education achievement gap. And of course, the disproportionate African Americans in the prison system are killed at the hands of police. It's all related, from slavery to Jim Crow, through mass incarceration, and today. And it manifests itself in all the categories. And so this truth that we need to share and that people need to accept is what is needed in order to truly reconcile with our past, and so that we can move forward in a productive way with an inclusive mindset. For far too long, we have allowed idealistic narratives to fester and to grow into this idea that America has always been has always had an unrelenting commitment to equality, but that hasn't been the case. We have been debating the morality of the Civil War and if there was room to compromise, which might have avoided that conflict. We have been debating the morality of every institution that systematically and systemically shows to be lacking of Black representation. And so only through truth can we reconcile. And those are in the words of Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative. We need to understand what the legacy of slavery, of Jim Crow, of everything after, how that manifests itself today, and what is needed in order to repay the debt owed to African Americans for building up this country and for consistently showing up and forcing this country to live up to its highest ideals. We can't be scared of what we're going to find about ourselves, about our history, but also about how big of a task it's going to be in order to move forward. And so for those reasons, I wholeheartedly support HR 40, and I believe that it must be passed with urgency so that we can move forward as a nation and begin to heal and begin to repay the debt owed to African Americans. Thank you.
Jeremy, thank you so very much. Again, let me raise my voice of appreciation for Benjamin Watson and Chairman Cohen, Michael Thomas, Chris Archer, to bring this to light to the media and to the larger audience in this nation, to give us a brief closing so that we have an opportunity, if there are any media, to ask questions. My dear friend, Dr. Ron Daniels, veteran social and political activist, former presidential candidate, the leader of the National African American Reparations Commission, NAARC, and who has devised a 10-point reparations program to support HR 40. And of course, HR 40 is a commission to study and develop proposals, action item to begin to face the sin and the negative impact of racist, structural racism and systemic racism. Let me also acknowledge Malcolm Jenkins, the leader of the Players Coalition. Thank him for his leadership. Dr. Daniels.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, our esteemed leader. And I also just want to give a special shout out to Chairman Steve Cohen. The hearing that was pulled together on Juneteenth of 2019 was truly a historic event. It brought thousands upon thousands of people to Capitol Hill. And under the leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, that powerful hearing reverberated across the nation. But I think it's special. I watched Congressman John Conyers work with Congressman Cohen, and I was especially proud to see him step forward and to chair that hearing as the chair of the Constitution Committee. So I just have to give a special shout out to Congressman Steve Cohen. On behalf of the National African American Reparations Commission, I want to express my profound appreciation to the Players Coalition for having the courage to embrace reparations and to announce your support for HR 40 today. As has been said, when the players speak, America and the world now listens. And I think you understand that. We certainly do. I like to watch sports. I'm checking out Michael Thomas, stuff he's doing over there. I'm watching your team and Benjamin Watson, and I'm out of Pittsburgh in the Hill District, so I'm checking out Chris Archer. So you better be up good up there in Pittsburgh, because that's one of my homes. I really do enjoy sports. And it's interesting, as you referenced Congresswoman Malcolm Jenkins. I witnessed an outraged Malcolm Jenkins on ESPN after Jacob Flake was shot 7 times with his children in the car. Malcolm has been in the forefront, as many of you are aware, working on a range of issues, on racial and social justice issues. On this day, he had boldly emblazoned across his t-shirt for all the world to see the word reparations. And I think what that meant was to him, I'm working on all these issues, but there's something special about reparations. And to me, that was emblematic of the voice of our visionary lead sponsor on HR 40, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who has boldly proclaimed that reparations cuts to the essence of structural institutional racism and white supremacy in our nation. I can't really stress that enough. It is our leader, as I've been watching her, boldly grab this mantle from her mentor, the Honorable John Conyers, and push forward. She is the one who has mentored us and said to us, this issue, more than anything else, all the other issues are important without question, but this is the umbrella. This is the issue that cuts to the heart, the essence of structural institutional racism and white supremacy in our nation. So in this moment of inflection, and it is a moment of inflection, when millions of people are in the streets, and where you have joined in to help build this very special moment, it is clear that the path to a more perfect union, those words in the Declaration of Independence, a more perfect union, is through the passage of HR 40. And so that's why Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has adopted the words of Martin Luther King and saying, why we can't wait. Why we can't wait. And she has done this to express the urgency of the moment. And that's the thing I want us to convey, and I want all of you to continue to convey. The support of the leadership of the House is clear. The support of the Senate and Schumer is clear. But we want to make sure that while all this work has been done, over 150 sponsors, that this moment is not missed, that we have the opportunity of a lifetime in this moment to really get at the heart of structural institutional racism. And everybody has mentioned it, truth and reconciliation. We want to reconcile, but there's justice. Justice must come before reconciliation. So today, the Players Coalition has added its voice, its powerful voice, to the growing chorus of organizations and leaders who are saying, under the leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, we can't wait. And your words, believe me, will reverberate and be heard clearly, loudly and clearly around the nation. And I just have to say that Juan Carlos, Tommy Smith, Jim Brown, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and yes, Muhammad Ali, they're proud of you. They're absolutely proud of you. So I close by saying, once again, we thank you so much for your courage and your support. Congresswoman.
Dr. Daniels, thank you for your grounded and historic leadership that has never ceased. Glenn, we are ready to open it up. My final sentence to the media, if they're here, is that all of these players, Chris Archer, Michael Thomas, Benjamin Watson, long storied history, putting themselves out on the line for America's acceptance and entertainment and joy, if I might. They only ask the question, walk a minute in our shoes and why we can't wait. Glenn, any press questions?
Thank you. We're now open for any press questions, if any press are on the line. If there aren't any questions, I think this will conclude our press conference. And Councilman, you
Glenn?
have some closing words?
Glenn?
I can
You
hear
hear
you.
me?
Yes.
Yes, certainly. Let me thank Angela. What we will do with this outstanding press conference is that it will be marketed across the nation. I expect you will get a full copy of it, and we ask you to share it. Social media is powerful. We ask your communications team to send it out to ESPN. We know that we in the United States Congress are facing the devastation of the loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a legal giant who probably resolved issues that many of us experienced the benefit of, and the crisis, if you will, of a rushing administration that didn't even allow her to rest in peace on the day of her death. And so we know that media are scattered, but we do hope that you all will work, and we'll work with you to get interviews for you as it relates to this very important press conference, and as well continue the leadership that you've already given across the spectrum of athletic opportunities and leagues, from the MLB to the NBA and the WNBA as well, and of course the NFL. You each have a role to do so. I am passionate about the fact that you pass HR 40, you get into the weeds of the systemic and institutional racism, and then you take the cover dealing with all of the inequities in the wealth gap, housing, education, psychologically, sociologically, scientifically, educationally, because that is what we face as the descendants of enslaved Africans in this nation. So can I thank you all? Michael Thomas, Chris Archer, Benjamin Watson, Jeremy Abusi, and of course, Malcolm Jenkins, and my dear friend, leader, Dr. Ron Daniels. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Cohen, as well. Thank you.
Thank you.